AITA for leaving my sister's wedding after she made me the butt of a family joke. I am the second of 3 children in a family where roles and labels were assigned early on. My older sister, Rachel, is the golden child. She's the social butterfly, the life of every party, and the one who lights up a room the moment she walks in. Growing up, Rachel's charisma was something everyone adored, and I don't think she's ever known what it feels like to be overlooked. I, on the other hand, have always been the responsible one. The one who picked up the slack, helped with chores, and made sure everything was running smoothly. Then there's our younger sibling, who's still figuring out life, but even they don't get the kind of scrutiny I do. Being the responsible one meant I took on duties that most kids my age never even thought about. I helped raise my younger sibling when our parents were too busy working multiple jobs. I kept track of bills when money got tight. During college, I juggled 2 part-time jobs while sending money back home to help with rent when my parents hit a rough patch. Meanwhile, Rachel was free to be, well, Rachel. She was the fun one, the charming one, the favorite. If she needed help, the family would bend over backward to support her, but if I needed something, the response was always, "You're so capable, you'll figure it out." Rachel's charm comes with a sharp edge, though. She has this habit of turning people into the butt of her jokes. At family gatherings, I became her favorite target. It started small. She'd call me Mom Jr. because I reminded everyone to take their meds or clean up after themselves. I laughed it off at first because I didn't want to be seen as uptight. But over time, the jokes became meaner. She started calling me Miss Buzzkill, teasing me for preferring quiet nights with a book over partying. Once, during a family dinner, she joked that my ideal Saturday night was knitting and watching documentaries about taxes. Everyone laughed, but it stung. I tried to brush it off because standing up for myself usually led to more teasing. The dynamic didn't change as we grew older. If anything, it got worse. Rachel got married last weekend, and while I wanted to be happy for her, I was dreading the event. As her maid of honor, I knew I'd be in the spotlight more than I was comfortable with. Still, I tried to make the best of it. I poured my heart into writing a speech for the reception. I talked about how Rachel had always been my role model in her own way, about how happy I was that she'd found someone who loved her for who she was. I even added a few light-hearted anecdotes to keep it from being too serious. I wanted the speech to reflect how much she meant to me despite our differences. When the big day arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. I gave my toast during the reception, and to my relief, it went over well. People clapped, Rachel smiled, and for a brief moment, I felt like I'd done something right. But then it was Rachel's turn to speak. She started her speech by saying she wanted to acknowledge her maid of honor, the woman I've always looked up to, as a reminder of what not to be. The room burst into laughter, and my stomach dropped. Rachel went on to compare me to a 1950s sitcom mom who probably schedules fun time, and joked that if it weren't for her, I'd never have any excitement in my life. Every word felt like a slap in the face. She was tearing me down in front of 200 people, friends, family, even strangers. I glanced at my parents, hoping for some sign of disapproval, but they were laughing along like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. When the speeches were over, I excused myself and went to the bathroom. As soon as the door closed behind me, I started crying. I hated that I was crying because I knew Rachel would see it as proof that I couldn't take a joke. But I couldn't help it. All those years of being the family punchline had built up, and this felt like the breaking point. I stayed in the bathroom for a while, trying to compose myself. When I finally went back to the reception, I overheard people at my table joking about me being a buzzkill. One of them even said, "Well, at least Rachel's husband won't have to deal with that energy." I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my purse, quietly told the event coordinator I wasn't feeling well, and left. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages from Rachel. She called me dramatic for leaving her wedding early and accused me of trying to ruin her big day. My parents chimed in too, saying it was just a joke and that I needed to loosen up. When I tried to explain how hurtful the speech had been, they dismissed my feelings, saying Rachel didn't mean any harm. I finally told them that I was done being the family punchline. I said I've spent my whole life putting others first, but no one has ever extended the same courtesy to me. Now, everyone is calling me selfish and saying I made the wedding about me. But I can't help wondering, when is it my turn to be taken seriously? When is it okay for me to say, enough is enough? Update 1. After I posted about the wedding disaster, I decided to step back for a few days. I turned off my notifications, put my phone on silent, and focused on anything that didn't involve my family. It wasn't easy. Every time my mind wandered, I'd feel that familiar knot in my stomach, the one that came from years of biting my tongue and brushing things off to keep the peace. But this time, I didn't feel like keeping the peace. I needed to protect my sanity. The quiet helped, but Rachel wasn't about to let me have that. While I was trying to cool off, she decided to escalate. I woke up to a text from a cousin with a screenshot of a Facebook post Rachel had made. In it, she had written a long, passive-aggressive rant clearly aimed at me. Some people just can't take a joke. Imagine ruining your sister's wedding because you have zero sense of humor. Thank God I have my amazing husband and real friends who actually know how to have fun. She even ended it with one of those smug laughing emojis, like the whole situation was a joke to her. The comments were brutal. Her friends, her bridesmaids, and even some family members joined in, calling me oversensitive and accusing me of being a drama queen. There were comments like, "Wow, I can't believe anyone would walk out of their sister's wedding over a little humor," and "looks like someone needs to lighten up." A few cousins stood up for me, saying they thought the speech was cruel and unnecessary, but they were quickly shouted down by Rachel's clique. It was like watching a digital mob form, and I felt utterly exposed. I was hurt, but I wasn't surprised. This was Rachel's MO. If she felt cornered, she doubled down. I don't think she could handle being wrong. For her, it was easier to paint me as the villain than to take accountability. But as much as the post stung, what really got to me was the sheer volume of people piling on. These were people who had known me my whole life, people who had seen the work I put in to hold everything together. And yet, they had no problem tearing me down in public because Rachel told them to. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, something unexpected happened. Rachel's husband, Mark, reached out to me. At first, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what he had to say. But his message was surprisingly kind. He apologized for everything and said he felt terrible about the speech. He admitted he had no idea Rachel was going to take it that far and confessed that, after I left, a few guests had even told him they thought Rachel's jokes were mean-spirited. He tried to talk to Rachel about it that night, but she dismissed him, saying I was just being dramatic. Then Mark dropped a bombshell that completely changed how I saw the situation. He told me that Rachel had planned the entire speech specifically to humiliate me. He had overheard her talking to her bridesmaids a few days before the wedding, laughing about how roasting me was going to be the highlight of her night. She even rehearsed parts of the speech with them, making sure it would get the maximum number of laughs. It wasn't just a thoughtless joke in the heat of the moment, it was premeditated. She had gone out of her way to make me the punchline of her big day, knowing full well how it would make me feel. I was furious. All this time, I had been questioning myself, wondering if I was being too sensitive or if I had overreacted. But this wasn't some harmless joke that went too far. This was a calculated attempt to humiliate me in front of hundreds of people, and she had done it for her own amusement. And then, when I had the audacity to feel hurt, she turned the entire situation around to make me look like the bad guy. I sat with Mark's message for a long time. Part of me wanted to confront Rachel, to demand an explanation for why she thought it was okay to treat me like that. But then I realized, what would be the point? She had already shown me who she was. Confronting her would just give her another opportunity to spin the narrative and make herself the victim. So instead of engaging, I made a decision. I was done. I sent Rachel a final message. It wasn't long, and it wasn't dramatic. I told her that I was taking a break from her and from the family, and that I needed time to heal. I told her that I was tired of being the family punching bag, and that if she couldn't respect me, I saw no reason to keep putting myself in situations where I was treated like a joke. And then, for the first time in my life, I blocked her. No lengthy explanations, no back-and-forth arguments, I just hit block and moved on. It was liberating in a way I didn't expect. For years, I had been so focused on maintaining family harmony that I never stopped to think about what it was costing me. Cutting Rachel out felt like taking back a piece of myself that I had given away long ago. I wasn't just the responsible one or the buzzkill anymore. I was someone who deserved respect, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less. Update 2. Blocking Rachel turned out to be the spark that ignited a full-blown war within my family. My parents lost it when they realized what I'd done. To them, I had crossed some invisible, unforgivable line. They called me furious, saying I was being selfish and cruel for abandoning my sister over what they continued to insist was just a joke. My mother cried on the phone, saying she couldn't believe I would punish Rachel like this. My dad chimed in with his usual lecture about how family is supposed to stick together, no matter what. They framed it as though I had betrayed Rachel, as if I had turned my back on her in her time of need. Never mind the fact that it was Rachel who had turned her wedding into a public roast at my expense. Never mind that I had spent years swallowing every cruel comment, every backhanded insult, just to avoid creating conflict. To them, my refusal to let it slide this time was an overreaction, me being petty and vindictive. They didn't seem to care about the years of humiliation I'd endured, or how Rachel's jokes had chipped away at me bit by bit until I couldn't take it anymore. But then something unexpected happened. My younger sibling reached out to me. Out of all the people in my family, they were the one person I hadn't expected to hear from. Growing up, they had always been quiet, the kind of person who stayed under the radar. But in their message, they opened up in a way they never had before. They told me they had spent years laughing along with Rachel's jokes because they felt like they had no choice. They had seen how Rachel treated me and knew that if they didn't play along, they would end up being her next target. They confessed that they had always admired how I handled myself, how I never let Rachel's behavior stop me from being the responsible one, the glue that held the family together. And then they said something that brought tears to my eyes. They told me they were proud of me. Proud of me for finally standing up for myself, for refusing to let Rachel treat me like her personal punching bag anymore. It was the first time in a long time that I felt truly seen by someone in my family. But the biggest surprise of all came when Mark, Rachel's husband, reached out to me again. His first message had been an apology, a kind, thoughtful one that had taken me off guard. But this time, his tone was different. He wasn't just apologizing anymore. He was rethinking everything. Mark told me that Rachel's behavior at the wedding wasn't a one-off incident. It wasn't the first time she had crossed a line, and it wasn't the first time he had noticed it. Over the years, he had watched how Rachel treated me, our younger sibling, and even him when she thought no one else was watching. She had a way of belittling people, of tearing them down subtly, with a smile on her face, so it didn't look like outright cruelty. He said he had ignored it for a long time, convincing himself it was just Rachel's sense of humor. But after the wedding, he couldn't ignore it anymore. Hearing that some of their guests thought Rachel's speech was mean had shaken him. At first, he had tried to talk to her about it, but she dismissed him just like she dismissed everyone else. She called me dramatic, called the guests too sensitive, and waved off the whole situation like it didn't matter. But to Mark, it did matter. He told me, I married the life of the party, but I'm realizing she doesn't know how to be kind when the spotlight isn't on her. I didn't know what to say. I had spent so much of my life under Rachel's shadow that I had never considered what it must be like for Mark to be married to her. But the more he talked, the more it became clear that he was seeing her for who she really was, someone who thrived on attention, even if it came at the expense of the people closest to her. Mark admitted he wasn't sure what to do. He loved Rachel, but he was starting to question whether that love was enough to make up for the way she treated people. He asked me if I thought she would ever change, and all I could think was, I've spent my entire life hoping Rachel would change, and she never has. After that conversation, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt validated. For years, I had been told I was overreacting, that Rachel's behavior wasn't a big deal, that I needed to lighten up. But now, even her husband was starting to see what I had seen all along. On the other hand, I felt a pang of sadness for Mark. He was a kind man, and I could tell he had gone into his marriage with the best of intentions. But now, he was stuck trying to figure out whether the person he had married was someone he could build a future with. In the weeks that followed, things in my family continued to spiral. My parents kept pressuring me to make amends with Rachel, saying it was my responsibility as her sister. They refused to acknowledge that Rachel had done anything wrong. Meanwhile, Rachel doubled down on her social media crusade against me. She posted cryptic messages about toxic family members and shared memes about how some people just love to play the victim. Her friends and followers ate it up, leaving comments like, you're better off without the negativity in your life. It was like watching her build an echo chamber where she was always the hero and I was always the villain. But through it all, I held firm. I didn't unblock her. I didn't engage with the drama. I focused on rebuilding my own life, one step at a time. I leaned on the cousins and friends who had supported me, and I started setting boundaries with my parents. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without pain, but it felt like the beginning of something new, something healthier. As for Rachel and Mark, I don't know what's going to happen. Update 3. So, here's how everything shook out. A few weeks after the wedding, the tension between Rachel and Mark reached its boiling point. I didn't know the specifics right away, but Mark's earlier message had already hinted that things weren't sitting right with him. As it turns out, the wedding fiasco had opened a floodgate for him. Once he started questioning Rachel's treatment of me, it led him to start reevaluating how she treated everyone around her, including himself. It wasn't just the wedding speech or her dismissive attitude afterward, it was a pattern. A lifetime of Rachel's need to be the center of attention, her quickness to tear others down for a laugh, and her refusal to take accountability for her actions. When Mark finally confronted her about everything, it turned into a massive blowout. He told her he was rethinking their entire relationship, and, as expected, Rachel didn't handle it well. True to form, she deflected, screamed, and, of course, blamed me. She insisted I was poisoning him against her, claiming I had always been jealous of her and was now taking revenge by sabotaging her marriage. Rachel, being Rachel, couldn't fathom that Mark's frustrations with her had nothing to do with me and everything to do with her own behavior. Next thing I know, I get a phone call from an unfamiliar number. Curious but cautious, I answer it, and there she is, Rachel, screaming down the line like a banshee. She's in full meltdown mode, calling me every name in the book and accusing me of turning her husband against her. She claimed I was a vindictive B*TCH who had always wanted to ruin her happiness. It was the same narrative she'd been spinning for weeks, only now she was shouting it directly at me. I didn't let her get under my skin this time. Instead, I kept my tone steady and told her that Mark was a grown man with a mind of his own. If he had issues with her, that was something she needed to take up with him, not me. I reminded her that her marriage was her responsibility, not mine. Then, before she could fire off another round of insults, I hung up and blocked her again. Not long after, Mark made his decision. He left. Rachel begged him to stay, promising she would change, but it was too little, too late. She tried everything, tears, guilt trips, dramatic social media posts about fighting for love, but Mark wasn't budging. He had reached his limit, and no amount of Rachel's theatrics could undo the damage. Their marriage, which had barely lasted 2 months, was over. The fallout was both chaotic and oddly validating. Rachel's meltdown only got worse after Mark left, and this time, our parents couldn't ignore it. They were forced to see her for who she really was. They saw how she lashed out at everyone around her, how she refused to take any accountability for her actions, and how she twisted every situation to paint herself as the victim. For the first time in my life, they didn't excuse her behavior. Instead, they called me. Not to demand that I fix things, but to apologize. It wasn't a quick or easy conversation. They admitted that they had let Rachel get away with too much for too long. They said they were ashamed of how they had treated me, not just at the wedding but throughout my life. They admitted they had always taken my reliability and strength for granted while letting Rachel skate by without consequences. They said they should have defended me that night and that they deeply regretted their part in making me feel like I didn't matter. I didn't forgive them right away. Words are easy, actions are harder. I told them that if they truly meant what they said, they would need to prove it over time. I set boundaries with them, clear ones. I told them I needed space to heal and that I wouldn't tolerate any more favoritism or attempts to guilt me into reconciling with Rachel. To their credit, they didn't push back. They said they understood and would do whatever it took to rebuild my trust. As for Rachel, she's been eerily quiet since Mark left. The Facebook posts about me have stopped, and she hasn't tried to contact me again, at least, not yet. I don't know if she's genuinely reflecting on her behavior or if she's just too humiliated to reach out, but either way, I'm fine with the silence. I've spent enough of my life dealing with her drama. Meanwhile, I've been thriving. I moved into a new apartment, a cozy little place that's all mine. It feels like a fresh start in every sense of the word. Work has been going well, too. I got a raise shortly after the wedding, which felt like the universe giving me a little pat on the back for surviving all the chaos. And for the first time in a long time, I'm focusing on myself. I've even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it feels good to open myself up to the possibility of love without the weight of my family's baggage dragging me down. I'm learning to enjoy life on my terms, without constantly worrying about being the responsible one or the fixer. Looking back, walking out of that wedding was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It was the first time I truly stood up for myself, and it set off a chain reaction that changed everything. My relationship with my parents isn't perfect, but it's improving. My younger sibling and I have grown closer, bonded by our shared experiences of being overshadowed and overlooked. And Rachel? She's finally facing the consequences of her actions, whether she likes it or not.